Hello, I'm Charles Coe, and I'd like to welcome Earl Kim, Now and Then, a virtual salon brought to you by Convergence Ensemble. The mission of Convergence Ensemble, fostering community through chamber music. Convergence Ensembles provides welcoming, accessible, and exceptional quality music experiences for audiences, educational institutions, and neighborhood organizations throughout New England. This event is intended to explore a question Mr. Kim grappled with his entire adult life. How can we use the arts to help create a more humane world? I'm going to take a moment to talk a little bit about how this event's going to proceed. In a moment, I'll introduce Rachel Goodwin, pianist and Convergence Ensemble founder and artistic director, who will talk about the personal and professional significance composer Kim's work holds for her. She'll introduce the video recording of Convergence Ensemble performing then and now and then. After the video, we'll hear presentations from our three panelists, D'Anna Fortunato, Joseph Gerson, and Ray Matsumiya, all of whom I'll say more about later. After those individual presentations, we'll have a group panel discussion, during which we'll have a chance to hear some of your questions, which we encourage you to enter into the chat box. Following the Q&A, we'll close the evening by showing again the musical portion of the video. So now, I'd like to turn things over to Rachel.
Welcome. Thank you for joining Convergence Ensemble for our exploration of the intersection of history, art, and activism, centering around Earl Kim's musical composition, Now and Then. As a surveillance pilot in the US Army Air Force, Earl Kim flew over Nagasaki 24 hours after the atomic bomb was dropped on the city, and later described the devastating vision as scorched earth. 36 years later, Earl Kim wrote Now and Then and explained, although each of the songs was conceived in a day, the years that intervened between their completion and Nagasaki seemed to have been necessary before they could be set down. As a musician and an American, I am grateful that Earl Kim wrote this heartbreaking, devastating, and terribly beautiful piece of music for all of us. Earl Kim also co-founded and led Musicians Against Nuclear Arms. Earl Kim's story is uniquely American. He was the child of Korean immigrants. His father, a poet, ran a fruit and vegetable market in Los Angeles. His mother was a master tailor and an embroidery artist. The day he flew over Nagasaki, August 9th, 1945, Earl Kim was only 25 years old. That he went on to become an important American composer and beloved teacher is a powerful example of profound resilience. Kim lived with the consequences of the radiation from the nuclear bomb his whole life, and 50 years later died from illnesses caused by the radiation. When I was in elementary school, I lived through the Cuban Missile Crisis, the closest the world has come to full-scale nuclear war. Participation in an improbable elementary school debate about bomb shelters, with thanks to research assistance by my father, meant that I learned at a very young age that no living creature would survive even the smallest of nuclear bombs. Hearing Earl Kim's Now and Then when it was composed in the 1980s was an epiphany for me that helped answer the question I had struggled with since childhood. How can music contribute in a world that we humans are capable of destroying completely with nuclear bombs? Can music tell us something we need to know about this? Earl Kim's words and music are a powerful meditation on this question, and his own words best describe the work you are about to hear. Poetic images dealing with the death of friends, the innocence and vulnerability of daffodils, the loneliness of one's final moment, and Chekhov's prophetic image of an earth which for thousands of years has borne no living creature.
On the meadow, all living things, all living things, all living things, having completed their cycle of sorrow, are extinct. For thousands of years, the earth has borne no living creature on its surface, and this poor moon lights its lamp in vain. On the meadow, the cranes no longer waken with a cry, and there is no sound of the May beetles in the lime trees. Thither, thither, a far cry for one so little. Fair daffodils march then there, then there, then thence. Daffodils again march then, again, a far cry again for one so little. Roundelay. On all that strand at end of day, steps sole sound, long sole sound, until unbidden stay, then no sound on all that strand, long no sound, until unbidden go, steps sole sound, long sole sound, on all that strand at end of day. Thither. Thither, a far cry for one so little. Fair daffodils march then there, then there, then thence. Daffodils again march then again, a far cry again for one so little. Among the deepening shades. The death of friends or death of every brilliant eye that made a catch in the breath seem but the clouds of the sky when the horizon fades, or a bird's sleepy cry among the deepening shades.
Oh
A beautiful piece performed beautifully. That video was produced by Nick Stevens and Peter Atkinson. The featured artists were Makenna Parks, visual artist, D'Anna Fortunato, mezzo, Linda Toot, flute, Hee Min Choi, viola, and Ina Zerdorovici, harp. I'd like to now invite D'Anna Fortunato on screen, if D'Anna would join us. And I will read her bio while we are waiting for her. D'Anna Fortunato, mezzo-soprano. Her versatility has long been her trademark. She has sung Berlioz with Roger Norrington, Falstaff with Seiji Ozawa, and Bernstein with Leonard Slatkin. Her performance of Berlioz folk songs with Hugo Wolf was featured on WNET TV's Summertime series. In the area of opera, Ms. Fortunato has been acclaimed for leading roles with the New York City Opera, Glimmerglass Opera, Kentucky Opera, the Opera Company of Boston, Monadnock Festival, Connecticut Grand Opera, and Rochester Opera Theater. As a concert and oratorio soloist, she has appeared with such groups as Chamber Music Society of Lincoln Center, St. Luke's Ensemble, Clarion Music Society, Musica Sacra, Bach Choir of Bethlehem, the New York Choral Society, and the Boston Camerata, among many others. Her festival engagements include Marlborough, Tanglewood, the New York International Festival of the Arts, Blossom, Brattleboro, the Bach Festival of Rome, the Casals Festival, the Carmel Bach Festival, and the Monadnock Music Festival. Ms. Fortunato is professor of voice at the New England Conservatory of Music in Boston and at the Longy School of Music in Cambridge. D'Anna.
Thanks, Charles. And thanks to Convergence Ensemble for this honor of being involved with so many wonderful colleagues and for the chance to sing this great music again. Especially brings back to me a visceral effect it had on me as a performer as we recorded it earlier this month. Even before rehearsing and recording this video, what hit me viscerally was the truth the music bears in its content. By contrast, what we witness now is the drumbeat of so-called fake news, twisted modern world history, and slashed history courses, especially in secondary education. All of this makes artistic truth-sayers more vitally important than ever for me and many others. I believe that Earl Kim was one of those seminal voices with undeniable warnings wrapped in riveting, exquisitely composed music. Now and Then is one of his most urgent works, fusing shattering poetry into a world that can leave a big impact on all involved, performers and listeners alike. The additional layer of the pandemic on us performers left me, especially, with the feeling of aloneness, as we were unusually separated from one another with the pandemic in all our different positions on the floor. Yet there was a wonderful sensitivity to each other, especially as several of the musicians had performed the cycle with me previously. This cycle is a musical journey unlike most others I have taken, in part because of the transparency and delicacy of the instrumentation, sometimes supporting the voice, sometimes punctuating a more assertive verbal line, and sometimes offering a mantra-like accompaniment, but at all points creating the feeling of a spatial openness for each statement to take its full effect. For me, as a singer, the biggest challenge was to find ease and freedom in the wide-ranging intervals that create a sweeping emotional commentary. Each song, it seems to me, is a gem unto itself I could hear over and over again. But as a whole, so very cohesive with the fifth song of the cycle, bringing the feelings expressed earlier, to a lyrically sad ending as the whispered bird song lilts in the viola during the postlude. My hope is that Earl Kim's cycle may help clarify the listener's association with past atrocities and help point the way forward to individual actions against the forces that produced these Japanese bombings. Perhaps the title could read at this point, Now and Future. Thank you.
D'Anna, thank you for those wise and wonderful words and for your exquisite singing on Now and Then. Our next panelist is Joseph Gerson. Joseph, if you would please join us while I read your bio. Joseph is president of the Campaign for Peace, Disarmament and Common Security, and vice president of the International Peace Bureau. He is also associated with a number of other peace, justice, and climate organizations. A civil rights movement activist and Vietnam War-era draft resistor and organizer, he later joined War Resisters International in Europe, where he worked with World War I conscientious objectors, nonviolent resistors to Nazi rule, PLO representatives, and Israeli pacifists. He helped launch the nuclear weapons freeze movement of the 1980s and has worked closely with Japanese A-bomb survivors and Asia-Pacific and European nuclear disarmament and peace movement leaders. He has participated in the World Conference Against A and H bombs numerous times and was the lead organizer of this year's World Conference, Abolish Nuclear Weapons, Resist and Reverse Climate Change, for social and economic justice, with participants from 39 nations. His PhD is in politics and international security studies, and his books include With Hiroshima Eyes, Atomic War, Nuclear Extortion and Moral Imagination, The Deadly Connection, Nuclear War and U.S. Military Intervention, The Sun Never Sets, and Empire and the Bomb. He is taught at Tufts University, the College of the Holy Cross, and Regis College. Joseph, over to you.
Thank you, Charles. I hope you can see me. I have a little difficulty here with my computer at the moment. First of all, I just want to say that it's really a privilege to be asked to join in this program. And as I listened to the music, I couldn't help but think about some of the anthems and choruses that I've heard in Japan, commemorating those who suffered and the appeal that never again the atom bomb. Get the right. I'm sorry here. I've run into a problem. I need to apologize and get back in. I'm sorry. Okay, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you fine.
Okay, I'm very sorry about that. Please ask permission to record, yes. I apologize for that. Norma Field described an especially precious role of abused but courageous minorities who do battles for themselves and for majorities. They are a precious people whose suffering makes them sensitive to the dangers faced by the wider community. They sacrifice themselves in inspiring movements for peace, justice, and human security and survival. Taniguchi Sumitaro was one of those people. The savaging of Hiroshima and Nagasaki was a crime against humanity. The bomb's fireballs were about 3 million degrees centigrade. Children, women, and men near the epicenters of the explosions were vaporized. In Nagasaki, in the first second after the bomb's detonation, everyone within a mile radius was irradiated. Then came the blast wave, destroying nearly every structure within that radius, followed by the heat wave that burned people and rubble indiscriminately. The historian John Dower described the fiery inferno peopled with monsters and naked, tormented bodies, a raging inferno, streets full of monstrously deformed creatures, excruciating pain without medicine and without surcease. Outlines of bodies were permanently etched as white shadows and black nimbus on streets or walls, but the bodies themselves had disappeared. By the end of the year, 70,000 people had died in Nagasaki. Cancers and radiation diseases later killed many more. Genetic damage led to babies' deaths and mutations, including births of so-called jellyfish babies born with translucent skin and no bones. They were, of course, born dead. The most senior US generals and admirals, including Leahy, Eisenhower, and LeMay, opposed the A bombings, knowing that Japan was already defeated and that Japanese diplomats were suing for peace on terms that Truman accepted after the A bombings. We can discuss why the A bombs were dropped in the Q&A session. Taniguchi-san was a 16-year-old postman when the blast wave blew him off his bicycle. He hugged the ground as it trembled like a massive earthquake. Two small children flew past him like pieces of dirt. A rock crashed onto him, and he kept telling himself, "I will not die here. I will not die here." When he eventually raised himself, his shirt was gone. His left arm was badly burned, and peeling skin hung from his fingers almost to the ground. The two children were dead, one burnt black. He didn't know that his back had been completely scorched. Unable to move, a factory worker carried him to a farm, where people around him groaned, cried for water. After lying there for 3 days with nearly no water or food, he was found and carried to an elementary school where the wounded died and were carried out one after the other. Taniguchi-san was then hospitalized for almost 4 years, lying on his stomach and barely able to move for most of that time. Black organic goo dripped from his bed sores, leaving an open wound that never completely healed. His bloody, almost skinless back was constantly exposed, and he endured agonizing treatments that led him to cry out to be allowed to die. It was at this hospital in 1946 that the U.S. Army photographed the boy with the bloody crimson back and who was near death. Taniguchi survived, though with constant pain and anxiety due to his scars and the ways people looked at him and discriminated against him. Like many other hibakusha, the A-bomb survivors, his heart broke after repeatedly being rejected for marriage. There was intense discrimination against the hibakusha, and this led him to decide to end his life. Looking out at the sea, he saw the faces of his postal colleagues and other A-bomb victims and decided that he would outlive the tens of thousands of people whose lives had been cut short by the A-bomb. This, he wrote, was the starting point of his dedication to the movement of A-bomb survivors, the hibakusha. With other activist hibakusha, Taniguchi came, in the words of Wilfred Burchett, to represent the indestructibility of human resistance, the most stalwart and militant of peaceniks. They created the hibakusha movement that inspired people around the world, including the diplomats who recently negotiated the Treaty for Prevention or Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. It took a decade for Taniguchi-san and the other hibakusha to begin coming out from their isolation, their poverty, and hiding their terribly scarred faces and bodies. A few joined the First World Conference against A&H bombs in 1955, and the next year they created Hidankyo, the nationwide Japan Confederation of A&H bomb sufferers organizations. Along the way, they had to overcome the disempowering and pacifying Nagasaki narrative created with the deep involvement of the US military. Until the US formal occupation of Japan ended in 1952, It was forbidden for Japanese scientists, doctors, or others to meet to learn about the causes of the suffering and diseases resulting from the A-bombs, or to write about what had been inflicted on the two A-bomb cities. Newspapers were censored. Film and photos taken in the immediate aftermath of the A-bombings was seized, lest they be used in Soviet propaganda. The US military ensured that the first and most widely distributed book written by a Japanese writer about the A-bombings taught that the A-bomb was an act of God. This and the city's father's conservative strategy for winning government reconstruction funds stacked the cards against the challenging truths of Taniguchi and other conscious hibakusha. They were angry, in desperate need of medical and financial assistance, and committed to ensuring that no one else would ever suffer hell on earth as they had. It was in this environment that in 1956, when Taniguchi-san and other hibakusha created the Japan Confederation of A&H bomb sufferers organizations, they issued three demands: development of a movement against A&H bombs, promotion of government-funded medical treatment, and self-reliance for hibakusha and compensation and support for bereaved hibakusha families. Taniguchi-san, in constant pain, a humble, shy, and soft-spoken man, preferred to do his movement building in the background. But in 1970, one of the first color photos of a horribly wounded hibakusha, was Taniguchi-san, was published in Japan's leading newspaper. As the image was broadcast on Japanese television and around the world, Taniguchi Sumitaro, with the reddened back, became famous across Japan and internationally. In constant pain and reticent to tell his personal story, he nonetheless realized that with the photo of his tortured body, he had become an international icon and was obligated to become a public figure. In the years that followed, he courageously pushed himself to speak to one journalist after another and accepted invitations to speak at meetings and rallies. Excruciating pain was his constant companion as he traveled Japan and the world, including speaking at the UN General Assembly. The first of my most powerful memories of Taniguchi-san is being introduced to him 25 years ago or so, and being told that he still had open wounds. And I also remember from that meeting, Taniguchi's soft-spoken greeting and his equally soft handshake. My last memory of him is from a reception following a conference in Nagasaki. Taniguchi with other hibakusha was happy, singing, and wearing a colorful hat that had been given to him. It brings tears to my eyes to remember that in the midst of all that, Taniguchi-san could smile, sing, and feel joy. Friends, today's average strategic nuclear weapon is 20 times more powerful than the two that savaged Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Even a small exchange of 50 to 100 of the world's estimated 3,720 deployed strategic weapons could result in the immediate deaths of 20 million people, followed by the deaths of as many as 2 billion people as a result of the fires and smoke that would cause global cooling and worldwide famine. The US is in the process of spending 1.7 trillion, I heard 2 trillion this week, for new nuclear weapons and their delivery systems. And on at least 30 occasions since the Nagasaki A-bombing, during international crises and wars, the US has prepared and or threatened to initiate nuclear war. And every other nuclear weapon state has done so at least once. With their doomsday clock now set at 100 seconds to midnight, the closest ever, the bulletin of the atomic scientist is warning us to take action to prevent a nuclear apocalypse. Taniguchi-san and his hibakusha colleagues are no longer with us. With the hibakusha's average age now at 83 years old, they will not be long with us. It thus falls to us to find, to be inspired by, and to act from the spirits of courage and vision of Taniguchi-san and other inspiring hibakusha. Like Bertrand Russell and Albert Einstein, who urged that we remember our humanity and forget the rest, hibakusha warned that human beings and nuclear weapons cannot coexist. My hope is that Taniguchi-san's legacy will lead us to rededicate ourselves to the survival of our species, and that we take every action we can to build popular movements needed to create a nuclear weapons-free and sustainable world. With Joe Biden's election, we have opportunities to extend the New START treaty, to rejoin the nuclear agreement with Iran, to win a no first use policy, and to slash some of the spending for the new nuclear weapons. Let us rise to that occasion. And to learn more about Taniguchi-san, you can read his memoir, available from the Campaign for Peace, Disarmament, and Common Security.
Joseph, those were some powerful, disturbing, and sometimes frightening stories you shared, but there are stories that the world needs to not shy away from. So thank you for sharing those with us. Our next panelist is Ray Matsumiya. So Ray, won't you please join us while I read your bio? Ray Matsumiya is the director of the Cambridge, Massachusetts-based Oleander Initiative that gathers peacebuilders from around the world to Hiroshima, Japan, for life-changing programs and study tours. Inspired by a mother from Hiroshima, Ray has devoted his professional career to unofficial diplomacy, cross-cultural exchange, and peace building. Over the past 20 years, he has supervised programs for over 2,500 educators and civil society leaders in the US, Japan, Spain, and 9 Middle Eastern and North African countries. His programs have been featured in the New York Times, Boston Globe, El País, and PBS via NHK World. Ray Matsumiya has been an invited speaker at TEDx, the Massachusetts State House, the Dayton International Peace Museum, the U.S. Embassy of Tunis, and universities such as the Salon School at MIT and the Fletcher School of Diplomacy at Tufts University. He has had pieces published in USA Today and Inkstick Media. Ray received his master's degree from the Fletcher School at Tufts University and his BA from Wesleyan University. He is a certified mediator under MGL Chapter 23323C. And he is fluent in English and proficient in Japanese and Levant Arabic. Ray, welcome.
Hey, thank you so much for that introduction, Charles. It's really a great pleasure for me to be here today. Also, thank you to Joseph Gerson. Now, for those of you that don't know, Joseph is the authority on the issues of nuclear weapons here in the Boston area. And Joseph has also been an amazing mentor to me for the last 5 years. So thank you, Joseph. So I'm here to talk about a topic that means a lot to me. And that topic is the resiliency of the people of Hiroshima after the dropping of the atomic bomb. Here in America, the story of the atomic bomb ends with a mushroom cloud. It's the end of a great race for technology. It's the end of World War II. But in Hiroshima, the story begins with a mushroom cloud. And as Joseph said, it is a story of such horrific tragedy, of catastrophe, of loss. But the story of Hiroshima is also one of hope, of optimism, and also, most of all, of resilience. And I hope that this message resonates tonight because we're all looking for ways forward during this terrible era of COVID-19, that we're hoping to figure out ways to overcome adversity. And I hope the people of Hiroshima can provide some of that inspiration to do so. So I'm going to share my screen. So one of the reasons why this topic means a lot to me is because my grandfather is a hibakusha, or a victim of the atomic bomb. On August 6th, 1945, he took his men and his fire truck as a first responder, and he rushed into the burning city to help the victims of the bomb. He entered into a devastated city, and I can't imagine what he saw or how he felt that day. He was impacted by what he did. And And about 2 weeks later, he realized that the radiation floating there robbed him of his left eye. He lost it. But he survived, and he thrived for the next 35 years. And one of the reasons why he thrived was that he took something that he called the lesson of Hiroshima, and he applied it to his own life. And for him, the lesson of Hiroshima was the power of human resiliency. He saw that resiliency in the victims that clung so tenaciously to life when he tried to help them on August 6th. He also saw that resiliency in his own citizens that took his beloved city, they healed, and they made the city even more beautiful and stronger than before. So in talking about the resiliency of Hiroshima, I think one of the best metaphors to use is the ancient Japanese art of kintsugi. And what kintsugi is that you take a piece of broken pottery, you very carefully glue it back together, and then you add gold enameling to it. So the idea is that the brokenness becomes part of the story. It becomes part of the pottery. And what was broken becomes even more beautiful than it had been previously. So let's see how fast the people of Hiroshima put the pieces back together of their city. So as soon as the bomb was dropped, the municipal workers gathered together and they expended maximum effort to make sure that the basic necessities of the city were running. So within one day, electricity and water were restored. 2 days after the bomb dropped, the off-duty tellers of the Bank of Japan went back to work. They cleared out 54 bodies of their comrades, and they took their places behind their booths and their offices to make sure the city had money to keep functioning. 1 week after the bomb dropped, the city's trolleys started crisscrossing the city. And there's so many accounts saying how those bells brought such hope to people's lives at that most desperate time. A month and a half afterwards, so many schools reopened, even though many of them didn't have books or desks or even roofs. 3 years afterwards, over 50,000 of the 70,000 buildings that were destroyed were rebuilt. And just 5 years after, less than 2 miles away from the hypocenter of the bomb, the Hiroshima Carp baseball team took the field on opening day in 1950. Now, this is one of my favorite pictures from that era. This is from 1948, and this is at the Honkawa School. This is the closest school to the hypocenter of the bomb. When the bomb dropped, over 400 students and teachers were killed. In fact, there's only 2 survivors from that day. And this is from 1948. You can see the children having fun. They're dancing. They're showing joy. And in the background, you can see the Genbaku Dome, or the atomic bomb dome with the famous dome. And currently, it's really the reason why people go to Hiroshima. It's really kind of a sacred site. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and millions of people see that every year. But back in 1948, when my mother was growing up in Hiroshima, it was a playground. It was a playground for a city with no playgrounds. And my mother and her sisters would go in the dome where dozens and dozens of kids would be playing hide and go seek, or tag, or onigoko, or just having fun. They filled that dome up with laughter. Dozens and dozens of adults would also gather around the dome watching these kids play. And I often wondered, why did my grandmother let my mother play in the dome? There's so many newspaper accounts from that time that talk about pieces of debris falling off and hitting kids. But I think my grandmother understood the power of children, because children ruthlessly pursue fun. And I think my grandmother understood that power. And I think in the rebuilding of Hiroshima, at least spiritually, the children led the way. So I talked about how Hiroshima put the pieces back together. I'm going to now talk about the amazing, beautiful gold enameling that they put on to make their city even better than before. I think even right after the bomb, when people were trying to just make it, there's this idea that simply survival was insufficient. It wasn't enough. They had to do something bigger than themselves to recover from this horror. And what that was peace. You can see from this newspaper article in May of 1946, this is less than a year after the bomb was dropped. The citizens of Hiroshima gathered together and they erected a peace tower. It wasn't a tower of revenge. It wasn't a tower of anger. It wasn't even a tower of sorrow. It was a tower for peace. And that's how early this notion of peace came about in Hiroshima. Shortly afterwards, the politicians of Hiroshima decided to devote the city's rebuilding towards the image of peace. And for many years, political power was directly tied with your peace platform. Can you imagine that? That political power was directly tied in to a politician's belief in peace. Hiroshima actively promotes peace around the world. They have a whole well-funded office, part of the mayor's office, that aggressively exports peace to all corners of the world. It doesn't stop in the government. The city of Hiroshima wants to make sure that it creates peaceful citizens. And they have the only curriculum in the world that legally mandates that every single level of education, from nursery school all the way to senior year in high school, has a peace education component in it. I think one of the most inspiring things about Hiroshima, and really a testament of the people going past just survival into making something beautiful, is that Hiroshima is an example of mainstream peace. And what that means is that peace is ubiquitous. It's not just in the government and the educational system, it's in every part of everyday life. So when you go to Hiroshima, you can go to the Peace Memorial Museum. That's the main museum in Hiroshima. You can go to Peace Memorial Park that dominates the landscape there. You might go down Peace Boulevard, the main street of Hiroshima, and go over Peace Bridge. So you can kind of see where I'm going with all this. It's even been somewhat commercialized. You can stay at the Peace Hotel and then eat afterwards at the Peace Cafe, get a snack on the street of a peace-themed snack. You can go to a peace bathhouse, get on a peace bike share, and get your nails done at the One Piece Nail Salon. So Hiroshima is a society where peace permeates every single facet of life. I think that's why Hiroshima is so inspiring, is that it's really the living embodiment of peace, optimism, and resilience. Because in 1945, Hiroshima looked like this. It was described as a burned plane or a socket without an eyeball. And currently, Hiroshima looks like this. Not only is it a beautiful modern city, it's a city that built itself in the image of peace. So my name is Ray Matsumiya. I'm the director of the Oleander Initiative here in Cambridge. And thank you so much for your attention.
Ray, thank you so much for your beautiful presentation. I'd like to invite our panelists now to join us, our other panelists, Joseph and D'Anna. I'd like to start off our conversation with one question. What's your response to cynicism when people look at the world as it is, or some of these terrible things that has happened throughout history? The people who say, well, there's no chance for us to do better, that the human race is just basically doomed to destroy itself. What's your response to that cynicism and gloom? And any or all of you want to respond to that?
I'll jump in and say, look, you know, in my lifetime, we've seen enormous change. We've seen as a result of human activity, right? I mean, the civil rights movement in this country really gave us a second democratic revolution. You know, for the Vietnam War, we wondered, you know, when those bombs would ever stop, but popular opposition ended that war. You have the women's movement. Any number of times we had in the early 1980s, at the height of the Cold War, millions of people across this country in town meetings and referendums across the state, people in mass demonstrations in the United States and Europe. They forced the Reagan government to do what it said it would never do, negotiate with the Soviets. And that led to the end of the Cold War. So, I take from the Hibakusha, who suffered beyond comprehension and who have gotten to the point where they have made it possible for a number of nuclear disarmament treaties to be passed. So if people really value their lives and act on that basis, then I think we can make the changes we need.
Yeah, I agree with Joseph, and I think a lot of it has to do with optimism. And I think a lot of people think places like Hiroshima and Nagasaki are depressing places because of what happened there. But it's actually great places of optimism because of what the people have done afterwards. And it's just amazing to see how these people recovered and move forwards. And if that doesn't give you optimism that the world is going to be a better place, I'm not sure what would.
What gives me some optimism is that the young people of this country and perhaps elsewhere are now stepping forward with much more education, much more understanding of all of the issues of these various movements that have been going on. And I feel, if the word is optimistic, I feel encouraged that they will not stop, that they are voting, that they are involved with everything. They join hands with people of all stripes and work towards common goals. I find that to be startling and wonderful.
The young people are leading the fight against climate crisis.
True, so true. Do we have any questions from the folks who are attending the event that they would like to put forward?
Which you might not know you can do by writing them in the chat.
Right, there's a chat line. And Nicholas and Joseph, if there are any, okay, I see that we don't have any questions from anyone yet. So I have another question that I would like to ask to all of you. What is it about this work that you're doing in your respective ways? What is it about it that appeals to you, that draws you in personally, not just professionally, but what's the personal draw or appeal of doing this kind of work for you all? Question for any or all of you.
So again, I'll jump in to say that I'm Jewish, born in 1946, which means in the immediate aftermath of the Holocaust. And, I was taught as a child, never again to anyone, never to participate in the crimes of silence, which is to say to turn your head away from injustice that's being done, and that there's a very direct relationship between truth and who lives and who dies and how. We certainly see that now with the pandemic, don't we? This led me into the civil rights movement, led me into the movement against the Vietnam War. And then as I learned more about nuclear weapons, into this very basic struggle for human survival. I mean, the reality is that an incident, an accident, miscalculation could lead to nuclear weapons flying in the next few minutes and then to the end of life itself. So, I have family, so I'm concerned about my own life, but I'm concerned about my family and other people. And basically, the human species faces two existential threats, one from nuclear weapons and the other from climate change. And if we don't struggle against it, then our fate is sealed. But if we do struggle against it, then there can be a future for people and for the planet.
I guess it's a personal connection for myself as well. Ever since, because of my own family background, ever since I was 5 years old, my mother would be like, "You have to work for peace. You have to work for peace." And I was very lucky many years ago to start working in conflict resolution in the Middle East, which is actually as far away from Hiroshima as possible. But that's where my career started, and I've been working in that part of the world for the last 20 years. And just in the last 5 years, we moved all our programs to Hiroshima. So it kind of created a full circle. in my own career, connecting my personal and my professional life. But I was very fortunate for that to happen.
I know that Rachel joins me in thinking that music itself, especially with such riveting words, can really affect people in a very deep part of their core, and can perhaps, if they have the energy and the capacity, bring them forward to greater activities, greater resistance, greater ways of involvement that can really help enliven them and bring about change. I think one person can become many very easily.
I find that sometimes a work of art or a piece of music makes it so one can actually feel the underlying, like in the case of this, the underlying tragedy. It's just too big to face. It's something like that. We do have a question actually from online, and Nicholas isn't available, so I'm going to read it to everybody. What advice would you have, this is from Megan, for people now who are just surviving? What do you want to tell people who want to thrive but can barely get by?
Well, so this is a period of intense suffering between the virus, the unemployment that comes with it, the evictions. This is a very hard time. Hunger in this country right now, and for people who are undergoing in the most extreme circumstances, you know, in the short term, the best that can be done is to engage with other people. I was on a conference earlier today where a woman named Gladys Vega from Chelsea Collaborative. Chelsea's absolutely devastated with the virus and the fallout from this. And it's just basic mutual aid. People providing food for one another, caring for their families. This is what has to be done in the most immediate moment. And those of us who have a little bit more privilege at the moment, a little bit more resources to draw on, you know, it's really incumbent on us to act in solidarity in a whole variety of ways with the people who are really most vulnerable in this moment.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I mean, I agree with Joseph, where like looking externally is very important. I also think you have to look internally as well. Like despite whatever adversity you feel, there has to be something within you that just makes you go forward every single day. And that's something I always see, not just in Hiroshima, but also in my work in the Middle East, is that people have enormous ability to be resilient. And I think people often underestimate themselves and how resilient they can be, and underestimate their ability to keep moving forward no matter what the circumstances are.
Just to build on that, just to say that one of my dear Hibakusha friends and many others, you know, the most basic thing that they say is never give up. Just never give up. And we need to internalize that, I think, more in our culture.
I'd just add one more thing, if I could, that that people have reached out as in a major snowstorm. This is a major snowstorm in a pandemic. It's the same effect. And if people continue to reach out towards one another, I know in my community they have, and you know, we'll continue to be more assertive with one another and help one another, and also doing various fundraisers for others. I think it's extraordinarily important online. Whatever we can do as individuals and as groups and communities, as everybody has just stated, the city of Boston is remarkable. They're coming to other kinds of fulfillments for things to help others through this terrible time. So reach out.
Absolutely. Reach out. Rachel, did you have anything you wanted to add to that question?
Something about children, always remembering children. And as Ray pointed out, they're leading the way in Hiroshima because of their irrepressible need to play and Be joyous.
You know, I saw that now during COVID-19. My kid is 5 years old, and last year we had this birthday party where there were like 20 little kids running around the backyard and having a lot of fun. And this year, because of COVID-19, we decided to have only 3 of his best friends there, and they're all masked up, and all the parents were screaming at them to stay 6 feet apart. And we were worried that they wouldn't have fun, but it was exactly the opposite. They just didn't care. They figured out a way to have like the time of their lives. And for all the parents, it was really for me like the first time I felt a lot of hope in a long time. And I think Rachel's absolutely right that they often like lead the way in doing this. And I think that's something that I wish more people would tap or do something, because it's really like an amazing resource. It's just like their unrestrained joy is really powerful.
I think the unrestrained joy of children is a good place for us to put the pause button on the conversation for now. And thank all the panelists for your wonderful insights. And I'm going to ask Rachel to give some final comments and reintroduce the video. And if the rest of us could turn ourselves off and leave Rachel with pride of place to introduce once more the music.
Thank you, D'Anna, Joseph, Ray, and Charles for your reflections and stories. Earl Kim, Taniguchi, and Yoshio were young men when the nuclear bombs were dropped. Each of them had their life forever changed. Each offers to the world an example of profound resilience and courage, and each in their own way cried out to the world from this unimaginable experience. The great scholar, Buddhist, author, and activist Joanna Macy has said, of all the dangers we face, from climate chaos to nuclear war, none is so great as the deadening of our response. The mark of a great work of art is not only that it can bring our response back to life, but that each time one hears it, one hears something different. The first time I heard Now and Then, I was struck by the phrase, heard over and over again, for one so little, which I thought referred to children. I later realized that the texts literally speak of daffodils. But as is true of all great art, Kim's work suggests many interpretations and levels of meaning. Kim's music, in pure sound, even without the words, in places creates a world of great tenderness and vulnerability. Ray's grandmother spoke of why children were brought back to play in a devastated city, that people drew strength and inspiration from the power of kids ruthlessly pursuing joy. A work of art such as Kim's Now and Then allows us to feel the impact of life-changing events and then summon the courage and resolve to go on. We are living now inside a life-changing time, a combined pandemic and climate crisis. Maybe you will be the person to create a poem, a piece of music, a painting, a sculpture, a dance that reflects and inspires from our current time. When I heard Earl Kim's Now and Then that first time, my heart broke open. That is the gift that a profound work of art can give. And so in that spirit, I end with another quote from Joanna Macy. Don't be afraid of your heart breaking open. The heart that breaks open can hold the whole universe. It's that big. Finally, we want to note that the material from this salon will be taken into classrooms in high schools, middle schools, and colleges. We hope that in some small way, it will encourage our next generation to create a world that turns away from the darkness of violence and war toward the light of peace and justice. And now we invite you to listen to the recording one more time.
For thousands of years,
amazing that such beauty can be born of such terrible things. I'd like to invite everyone back on now, Rachel and our panelists. And please take your virtual bows, if you would. It was a wonderful experience for me being part of this, and I've been very inspired hearing your stories and listening to your music today. So please keep doing what you're doing in the world. I'd like to, yes, Rachel.
I'd like to take a minute to thank some amazing people that were part of making this all happen. First of all, our incredible staff, Nicholas Tran, who truly has been a co-creator of this event. He's our administration operations manager and also a composer. Next week, you can hear his work. Joe Borgia, who has been our marketing director and has helped us, our marketing and our communication, take a quantum leap into the future. And the wonderful Reverend Edwin Johnson, who so generously opened his beautiful church for us to make the recording. We needed a space that was that big in order to be safe. And he was incredibly kind. And the artist, Makenna Parks, whose artwork is just extraordinary and added so much. And finally, our audio visual engineering team, Nick Stevens and Peter Atkinson. I thought Nick Stevens, the way he coordinated with the music was so incredibly musical too. And let's see, our program note writer, Dexter Edge. And finally, for so much, we can't even name it all, our poet moderator, Charles Coe.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's been my pleasure. Thank you, and thank all of you who have joined us for this event. I hope Earl Kim's remarkable composition performed so beautifully by Convergence Ensemble and our panelists' powerful presentations have inspired you and remind you of the power of art to create beauty in a world in which beauty sometimes seems elusive. So now we will bid you adieu and hope that we see you again. I hope that you will visit the Convergence Ensemble website, convergenceensemble.org, and see some of the wonderful work they're doing. And if you feel moved, to make a contribution to help support their work.
And one other thing to know is that this complete video, that everything you saw tonight will be available online for months into the future. Tell other people about it. If you know a school that would love us to come in, we will bring Zoom live people along with experts on this.
Excellent. So now we wish you and yours peace and blessings through the holiday season. Be well, be safe, and until the next time we meet.